Greetings. Let's discuss the science about food and chemical sensitivity testing. I'm Dr. Russell Jaffe. I trained in internal medicine and then laboratory medicine at the Clinical Center of the National Institutes of Health. I've introduced a number of different methodologies, and I'd like to review briefly with you my last 3 or 4 decades in the area of clinical functional immunology. Now, yes, I do maintain a fellow status in a number of different organizations, and I have founded and lead PERC Integrative Health, Eliza Act Biotechnologies, and RMJ Holdings. And you can find me at drrusselljaffe.com and my research work at healthstudiescollegium.org. Now, what are we going to be talking about over the next few minutes? We're going to look at the foundations of functional immunology. We're going to look at food and chemical sensitivities, what they are and what they are not. And how do they form, and what do you do about them when they do? We're going to review common testing methods and compare and contrast them for precision and clinical meaning. And we're going to look at clinical evidence that measuring functionally T and B cell lymphocyte reactions are needed, and that LRA, lymphocyte response assay tests, LRA, is the gold standard. Now, our goal is to have an immune defense and repair system that is healthier so that we balance out defense and repair. Folks commonly understand this, that during the day we do mostly defense work. Our immune system mostly does defense work. But at night, that same immune defense and repair system goes out throughout the entire body, touching every cell, and any abnormal cell can get eliminated, and anything that's worn out can get replaced. Connective tissue structure, or cells that need to be stimulated to be replaced. A healthy immune system does not have allergies. No allergies. Tolerance is established. Anything foreign is neutralized and recycled, broken down in the lysosomal recycling center of the dendritic cells, of which we have 50 billion, as you see on the bottom of the slide. And each of those 50 billion cells, when energetic, when they have enough antioxidants and buffering minerals and essential cofactors, can engulf and recycle, can break down and reuse up to 50 foreign invaders. And whether it's a food digestive remnant, a bacteria, a virus, or anything foreign to you, your innate immune system should be able to identify it, take it in, and break it down, recycle it, and make you better. Now, autoimmunity, self-attack, autoimmune conditions are becoming very chronic. In fact, they're the supermajority of all chronic illness. At least 23.5 million Americans are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions, about 80% women. So when tolerance is lost, self-attack occurs. And we don't want that. So diet, genetics, infections, toxic chemicals all play a role, and the way they overlap, as you see in this colored Venn diagram, determines our risk or probability of having a chronic autoimmune condition. Now let's take a look briefly at the innate immune system, as you see on the right side of the slide, and the adaptive immune system, as you see on the left side of the slide. So when something foreign comes in, like a bacteria or a virus, our immune system should identify it, should bring it inside the lysosomal recycling center, break it down, and make use of those building blocks. Remember that your skin is more than a wrapper. And your mucosa, from your lips to your tush, including your respiratory mucosa and your digestive intestinal mucosa, are first line. And when we keep them repaired and resilient, we have multiple ways of excluding or identifying and recycling anything foreign and being resilient and resistant. And when needed, as you see on the left side of the slide, the adaptive or reserve and resilient immune system can be called in, including B-class lymphocytes that produce antibodies through plasma cells. And as you see on the lower left, helper and suppressor cells, Th1 and Th2 balance, helper and suppressor CD3, CD4, CD8. CD3s are the null cells that can be programmed. The CD4s are the helper cells. The CD8s are the suppressor cells, or we now call them regulatory T cells, because they don't just suppress and they don't just amplify, but they work together when we're healthy in harmony and balance. Now you see another brief review of the innate and adaptive immune systems, the innate on the left this time and the adaptive on the right, and there is some overlap through the T cells or some subsets of the T cells. And you see all the different kinds of cells, from macrophages and dendritic cells to mast cells and basophils and eosinophils and neutrophils, etc. All in the category of granulocyte or dendritic or wiggly or fibroblastic cells. And they're on surveillance. They do the first line defense and repair. They identify and eliminate abnormal cells, and when they need help, they call for the other side of the slide, the adaptive side, the B and T cell responses that support immune defense and repair functions. We hear a lot today about microbiomes, and there are many of them. So there's the digestive microbiome, but there's also a microbiome in your mouth and nose, in your eyes and ears, on your skin, and different parts of your body. And so there are many local microbiomes, ecologies of harmony or disharmony in the organisms that we either encourage and feed or that we allow because they help stimulate our repair system. So we want to eliminate foreign invaders before they get in, and we want to have a robust immune defense and repair system that repairs us from daily wear and tear and eliminates anything abnormal that might occur. Now, if we look for a moment at this adaptive side, we have cell-mediated, that is T cell responses that migrate to lymph nodes, and when something foreign, an antigen is the definition of an antigen is something recognized as foreign. It means generally more than 10 amino acids, so it's not tiniest, but it's still small. And that produces memory T cells that remember this experience, cytotoxic T cells, helper and amplifying cells, T regulatory cells. And the helper cells communicate with the B cell side, the antibody side, as you see on the right side of this slide. And these B cells also migrate to lymph nodes, and on antigen stimulation, they can become antibody factories, plasma cells that produce antibodies. And these can be neutralizing, helpful, and beneficial as immune memory, or these can be harmful and complement fixing, so it's important to know their function, not just their physical chemistry. Now here you see a colorized slide in the lower left, a lymphocyte that identifies the cell in the upper right, the red off-colored slide, is a cancer cell. And this lymphocyte is going to mark for apoptosis, mark for programmed cell destruction, this abnormal cancer cell. And that's what they do. Now, how do these immune responses occur? If we look at the bottom, we see first exposure, and then after a few days, an immediate response. This is what we call the IgM initial response. It's a brisk, robust, nonspecific response that says something foreign has come in and we need to respond. And this IgM response comes up quickly and goes away. And while it's operative, it's protecting from the invasion. And after days to weeks, IgG memory antibody comes up, sometimes IgA as well, and we can measure that. Although we need to look functionally to distinguish helpful from harmful antibody responses. And in the best of cases, we are protected if we have an infectious disease as a child like measles or get exposed today to a virus, including COVID-19. When our immune system is able to respond, we become protected because we produce a memory antibody that when that antibody sees that same infection again, prevents it from proliferating. So immune defense and repair is especially important today. It's always been important, but it's especially important in the 21st century, where we're getting exposed to more and more new infectious agents that we haven't seen before. So we want a healthy, tolerant immune defense and repair system, balanced, and able to deal with the amount of defense, which we can somewhat reduce, as well as have the building block tools, the essential nutrients, to repair us during restorative sleep. So we're going to talk about first-line defense. We're going to talk about how to prevent viral invasion and replication. Then we'll move on to look at recognition receptors. These are PRRs, these are pattern recognition receptors that are engaged to detect specific viral components like viral RNA or DNA and viral intermediate products. Because these can induce type 1 interferons, IFN is the abbreviation for interferon, and other pro-inflammatory cytokines if there's work that is left unfinished by the innate immune system. It's supposed to be handled by the adaptive immune system, called to attention by these communication molecules called cytokines, actually derived from essential fats from our diet. So we want to mobilize when necessary and viral replication has occurred. These are the adaptive responses called upon as needed. And yes, antibodies and lymphocytes are both important. The humoral antibody response, the cell-mediated T-cell response, both important. But we really need to distinguish what is foreign from what is us, and we need to maintain the ability to exclude the things that are foreign or recycle them so that they don't invade and burden us with either repair deficit inflammation or chronic autoimmune deadaptation, loss of tolerance in the immune defense and repair system. Now on the next slide, we also review innate and adaptive immunity. You see that something foreign, like a virus, could come in, induce a response, an IFN interferon response, and that then communicates with B cells to neutralize and produce antibodies against the foreign invader. It also would include natural killer cells and cytotoxic CD8 lymphocytes. These are the regulatory or suppressor lymphocytes, so that the immune defense and repair system can neutralize the foreign invader rather than let it take over and go rampant. So it's critical that we tune up our immune defense and repair system, and in order to do that, we need to communicate with it. We need to find out where it's tolerant and where it's reactive. And where it's reactive, we want to substitute to the extent that we can, which is usually quite a bit, while we're inducing repair through a lifestyle health promotion program. So we want to reduce risks, we want to boost immune defense and repair and stay healthier. This involves enough water and hydration. It involves first morning urine pH check to see if we have too much metabolic acid and need more buffering magnesium enhanced uptake with choline citrate. Restorative sleep so that we can reset and renew ourselves. And then choosing the foods, the diet, that we can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. And paying attention to the air quality, including maybe having an air cleaner in the rooms that we spend most of our time in. And in regard to dietary supplements, buffered L-ascorbate is your friend and a bedrock on which everything else does better. Indeed, buffered ascorbate is the maternal antioxidant that recycles and protects all others from the membrane to the nucleus. but sacrifices herself in order to recycle and protect the other antioxidants. So we need to take in buffered L-ascorbate based on some determination. We suggest the C cleanse. Zinc is a very important mineral for the immune defense and repair system and keeping a healthy zinc to copper balance. Most people need more zinc and they get too much copper. And so you want to have zinc as part of your daily supplementation plan, at least in the 21st century. And then polyphenolics, including quercetin dihydrate and low molecular weight OPC. That's a specific flavonoid, quercetin dihydrate, a specific flavanol, low molecular weight or soluble OPC. And they are synergistic with each other. And over the decades where we have been invited to publish review chapters and articles, we have found them to be safer, more effective, more bioavailable, and preferred. Now, in regard to vitamin D, which is really a neurohormone, we want to have enough to get us into the goal best outcome range of 50 to 80 nanograms per ml, and we want to have some supplementation to support and enhance liver detoxification and biological detoxification with a combination of diet and supplements. So, food and chemical sensitivities are often hidden. They're hard to detect, which is why we developed the LRA by ELISA Act test. They're sometimes known as delayed allergies, not to be confused with acute, immediate allergies. Sometimes they're more classically known as delayed type hypersensitivity, DTH, delayed type hypersensitivities. Now, this is not digestive intolerance. Digestive intolerance means you have a weak digestion and you want to strengthen it. And on the way to doing that, you want to substitute for any of the delayed reactors or delayed hypersensitivity reactions measured by the lymphocyte response assay. Now, allergy has 4 different major types. This was defined by Gell and Coombs in the 1960s. The immediate reactions, or type 1, are histaminic. They are measurable by RAST serum blood test or by a classic allergy skin testing, so-called scratch testing. And they are easy to detect by history because they're immediate. They occur within seconds to minutes from exposure. So the immediate allergies have to do with these histaminic cells, cells that are sensitized by the histamine that's derived from the histidine amino acid. And very often when you make your histidine into histamine, you don't have enough histidine to contribute a proton to stomach digestion. You get impaired digestion. So IgE is specific to these type 1 reactive so-called mast cells or histaminic cells. And typically the reactions are hives or wheezes or itching, and in more severe cases, anaphylactic reactions. So we want to strengthen the immune system so that it is less reactive. We want to keep the histidine in the histidine form and not convert it into histamine and sensitize our basophils and mast cells. Now, the delayed reactions have been the ones that have been very hard to measure but are important clinically. And the LRA by ELISA Act measures the reactive, the harmful IgA, IgG, including subtypes, and IgM, also measures immune complexes, and also measures direct T cell reactions, which are probably more important even than the antibody reactions in regard to delayed allergies. So type 2 are the antigen-specific antibodies that form a complex. Antibody-antigen activates the underlying complement cascade when it's a harmful antibody. And complement-fixing provocative IgG, IgM, IgA are harmful, but neutralizing antibodies are helpful. So just measuring a blood antibody, a serum antibody, just looking at physical chemistry of an antibody doesn't tell you whether it's good and neutralizing and helpful and protective, or is it harmful, complement fixing, and damaging? The type 3 reactions are the IgM anti-IgG antigen. So you have an IgM big antibody that wraps around a harmful IgG, a complement fixing IgG, that has found an antigen and is now bound to and will harm the temporal endothelial lining cells of blood vessels, or glomerulonephritis, which is a type 3 immune complex disease too much of the time. So as we see in the lower left, these form IC, or immune complexes, that damage blood vessels if they're not removed by the liver and the spleen. And the IgM helps protect and identify these for removal in what's called a type 3 immune complex reaction. Now, the T cell mediated ones, the most important ones, are the least involved with antibodies, because they are T cell reactions where you have a macrophage that receives something foreign called an antigen, processes it, then wiggles over to the lymphocyte, turns on the lymphocyte at the MHC locus, and activates those cells to your benefit against the invader. So there are three types of these delayed reactions: type 2, 3, and 4. Type 2 are reactive antibody, type 3 are immune complex, type 4 are cell-mediated. Notice you don't see neutralizing and protective antibodies listed because they are helpful. And so very often people are confused because they can physically measure an antibody, but they don't know what its function is. And that's why lymphocytes distinguish, and why lymphocyte response assays are the way to distinguish helpful from harmful antibodies, while also detecting immune complexes and T cell reactions. Now, in this table, you see how many conditions, very common though they be, that are related to type 1 or type 2, 3, 4, or just to weak digestion intolerances. And while asthma crosses classes, and so does celiac conditions and hyperthyroidism, there's chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome and fibromyalgia. There's pernicious anemia and sinusitis. There's Sjogren's syndrome and thyroiditis. There's type 1 and type 2 diabetes and various other chronic conditions, including systemic lupus erythematosus, SLE. So we detect the meaningful type 2, 3, and 4 reactions through the LRA testing system. The history gives you the type 1 reactions, confirmable by RAST or classic skin testing, and then you do have weak digestion, and some people need to be counseled about how to eat foods that are easy to digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune defense and repair burden. So delayed hypersensitivities or delayed allergies in the past have been hard to find because the symptoms are delayed. And it can be 3 hours to 3 weeks after exposure before the person feels poorly. Look up Schwartzman reactions, Arthus reactions, serum sickness reactions. These have been well described in the immunology literature. And because they drain vitality, people come in and say, my get up and go, got up and went, and I can't find it anymore. There's been a need to do more precise functional testing to distinguish, to identify, and be able to substitute for these delayed reactive substances. Now, we recommend the ex vivo high precision, clinically proven in outcome studies, community-based real outcome studies, the LRA lymphocyte response assay, because it has such precision, less than 3% variance. We'll talk again about that data in a few minutes. And we do not recommend the in vitro tests, the older generation tests, because they have wide split sample variance. And whether you talk about serum IgG or IgG subset, or you talk about particle size tests or cytokine release tests, you're talking about less precise, more confusing procedures that have difficulty even reproducing themselves consistently, let alone guiding clinical care. And as a clinician, as well as a laboratorian, I felt the obligation to bridge that and not only develop a methodology that was robust and reproducible, but one that could be put to clinical tests in community-based outcome studies and shown beneficial in those studies, as well as in the anecdotal or individual case studies that we've collected and we want to share with you. So you can do the classic serum test. It's easy to do. You can collect a specimen at any time, but it doesn't tell you functionally, doesn't distinguish good from bad. It gives you a long list of reactions, but it doesn't tell you which ones are meaningful and which ones are neutralizing and beneficial, and therefore, from our point of view, not too helpful. Now there are devices, machines that'll measure a 10 micron particle, as if everything at 10 microns in the blood is a reactive lymphocyte. Turns out there's lots of things at that same size, including red cells that stack together called rouleau red cells, or platelet clumps, or granulocyte debris. So it's low specificity. It doesn't reproduce itself very well, as has been published by others, and so we don't recommend it. And there are mediator release technologies which are interesting but indirect, and they measure nominal volume changes, but they're not looking directly at the lymphocytes. They have a limited number of items that can test, typically less than 150, in contrast to LRA that can test for up to 500 substances on an ounce or two of blood. So we do recommend what we developed, the HSLRA ELISA ACT method. We directly observe the lymphocytes under conditions similar to what happens in the body. That makes it ex vivo. We look concurrently at all three delayed pathways. We have very few false positives according to our clinical reviews, and weak digestion intolerances can be identified along with a plan to strengthen digestion, which is intrinsic and implicit in the LRA by ELISA ACT results and plan. So here you see on the left non-reactive cells, and if you look carefully you can see those lymphocytes that are not reacting, and on the right you see reactive lymphocytes. I include this because some people say, oh, cell cultures are so hard to do, they're hard to distinguish the reactive from the non-reactive. Actually, this is pretty clear, the distinction. And yes, some of them have more judgment call, but that's why we have trained technologists and technicians that get the same results when you compare them in blind split samples. So our precision is partly based on our continuous quality assurance training. And for 2 ounces of blood, we can measure up to 500 substances. We can measure 300 or so substances on an ounce of blood. This includes the largest number of foods, additives and preservatives, environmental chemicals, toxic minerals, medications, molds, dander, hair and feathers, and herbs. And we purify all of these ourselves because we're protein biochemists and we needed cleaner antigens than were commercially available. So for precision and reproducibility and for comprehensive immune assessments with unmatched clinical value, we present ourselves and this information. And here I'm going to contrast the typical standard Burson and Yalow ELISA, which is a 5-step procedure, and each step adds at least 3 to 4% variance. So 15 to 20% is the best that standard sandwich ELISAs can do, and that wasn't good enough for us. So we discovered how to use an enzyme in the surface of a lymphocyte, as you see on the right, that in the resting state is inactive and becomes active when the cell sees something to which it has previously been programmed as foreign. It's a kinase at the MHC locus for those of you who are more technical. And this allows us to do the first 1-step amplified procedure and cell culture with less than 3% variance on consecutive blind split samples. So what do we do? Well, we draw the blood under special conditions. We then have it shipped to the laboratory cold but not frozen. Then in the laboratory, we gently spin it, put it into this special micro-titer environment, a special incubation chamber that's been pre-coated, each well with a different substance. We bring this back up to body temperature for 3 hours, and then we look at it directly in the microscope. We observe the reactions. And what is it? If we look at, say, consecutive blind split samples, as reported at the American Society for Investigative Pathology, there were 4,138 items tested, 4,050 matched, only 88 did not. That means 97.6 plus or minus 3% agreed, 2.25% were variant, less than 3% variance. Over 3 consecutive years, 2011 to 2014, and we had been doing this before and we continue to do it now, but this is what we reported to our colleagues at the American Society for Investigative Pathology in 2016. Here you see a picture of our novel microtiter plate. We do have a specific blood draw that includes a proprietary blood collection tube with a special cell preservative. And the first tube, in this case a lavender top tube, can be used for other tests, but it's not included in our cell culture because there is some activation of blood clotting that occurs just when you put a needle into a vein and start to draw blood. So we use the second, third, fourth, and fifth tubes, a total of 1 ounce of blood, about the amounts of blood the body replenishes in an hour, so it's not a large sample, but it does allow us to do hundreds and hundreds of cell cultures when properly performed. So we do have a specialized collection and shipment procedure. Please follow the instructions, read them and follow them. We do purify all of the antigens ourselves, and we have a unique patient preparation plan. Again, follow the instructions, and more importantly, a health appraisal questionnaire that, along with the LRA cell results, allows us to give specific recommendations about what should be eaten and what should be substituted, about what supplements and what activities, mind and body activities, would evoke healing responses or at least help people recover. We do have a rotation diet option for those of you who wish that, and we have a roughly 100-page digitally downloadable book called The Joy in Living the Alkaline Way. And we also have that in print because many people use it as a teachable moment to emphasize and allow people to bring home with them the guidance and information contained in The Joy in Living the Alkaline Way. So LRA is indicated for immune dysfunction and autoimmune conditions. It's indicated for any chronic ill health. And it's indicated when you want to optimize your performance. So let's say you were into physical fitness or mental fitness and you wanted to optimize your body's ability to repair and stay tolerant. LRA would be indicated for the healthy, and it would be indicated for the chronically unwell for very different reasons, but both having to do with immune defense and repair capacities, tolerances, and reactivities. Now, the first outcome study that we did was in fibromyalgia, intractable muscle pain, and we published in the Journal of Musculoskeletal Pain 50% pain reduction, 70% reduction in depression, 50% more energy, and 30% less stiffness in the first 6 months of effort. And this is some of the data. We normalized it at the start, so everyone was at 100% before. At the midpoint, you see all 3 groups seem better. That was 3 months. But by 6 months, you see that the magenta, the control group, was now back near baseline. They were more in pain. The primary fibromyalgia, with just simple muscle pain, was continuing to improve, and those with complex fibromyalgia, pain and other comorbidities, were improving even more relative to where they started. Then we took on the challenge of the classic autoimmune condition, diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, 2 different studies, each that achieved significance in reducing hemoglobin A1C by a full 1% compared to best ADA, American Diabetes Association, standard of care. So everyone had to be on best standard of care to get into the study. The control population continued as they had been. The experimental group followed our advice and over 6 months reduced hemoglobin A1C by a full percent, adding 20 quality years to their lives. And in the type 2 population, an 18% reduction in insulin, indicating again that there was an improvement in sugar insulin efficiency, insulin function as a growth factor, all to the good. So while we have tens of thousands of cases in our database and many case successes that we can discuss with you as colleagues, we do want you to know that we are adding to the peer review literature as we are able, by choice and by opportunity. Now, some case examples. Here's someone who had chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, and they say, I was amazed at the fast recovery from a 4-year struggle. Return to work, energy level and health stronger than before. I never thought I could be this healthy again. Here's another individual who said after 20 years of migraines, they're finally free of those headaches. And Professor Egger in Germany showed years ago that until proven otherwise, migraines are delayed food allergy sensitivities, hypersensitivities, and LRA by ELISA ACT has the most anecdotal important results, improvements in getting people to reduce or be migraine-free. A colleague, Dr. Norm Schwartz in Milwaukee, says that LRA by ELISA ACT is the most reliable and effective solution to solving his patients' chronic health conditions. And yes, we have many case studies which we're happy to share so that we can analogize or explain to an individual why this would be the smartest thing for them to do based on the success of other similar situations. Here's a thyroiditis case. 30-year-old woman, 7 years of symptoms before diagnosis was properly made, and that's very common. Her symptoms included fatigue, muscle weakness, joint pain, weight gain, bloating, digestive distress. She was initially treated with Synthroid and a European version called Euthyrox. Her current physician recommended the LRA test and plan. She was found reactive to 20 out of the many hundreds of items tested. This included the nightshade family of foods, trichophyton, a mold, benzaldehyde, and methylene chloride. And the program was to substitute for these reactive items while also enhancing supplementation and an alkalinizing lifestyle program. Initially, the energy levels dramatically increased, the pain reduced, and thyroid medications were reduced. Quote from the individual, "This is the best I have felt in years." So when we say inflammation in regard to the thyroid, we mean repair deficit, so that the blood-thyroid barrier does not get repaired. It becomes permeable. It allows the thyroid gland to get attacked and to have white cells and platelets and other repair cells coming in and producing antibodies to try and repair the blood-thyroid barrier. But in the meantime, this reduces thyroid function and is the very definition of autoimmune thyroiditis. Another thyroiditis case, 36-year-old woman, 5 pregnancies, 3 children. She reports low energy, 18 kilograms of weight, that's about 36 extra pounds, maybe 40 extra pounds, little joy in life, morning temperature often below 98 Fahrenheit. Routine tests showed total T3 and T4 to be within lab ranges, but on more sophisticated testing, the free T3 was low, TSH was elevated, as was 2-hour glucose and insulin. Free cortisol was up, that's a stress hormone, distress hormone, and the counterbalancing DHEA was down. LRA by ELISA ACT delayed lymphocyte tests were done, and the HAQ included. Items that were reactive included cow dairy, MSG, arsenic, sulfite, and chloroform. In addition, 2 grains of desiccated thyroid were prescribed when the temperature was less than 98 Fahrenheit in the morning. Green, dichromatic lights, and salt and soda baths were part of the restorative sleep restoration plan. And at just 6 months, person says she's asymptomatic, lost 10 kilograms, 22 pounds of weight, has discontinued thyroid hormones, free cortisol and DHE, as well as glucose and insulin, are now in balance and within normal ranges. How about ulcerative colitis? A 31-year-old woman diagnosed in October of 2013. She had done an over-the-counter cleanse that triggered bloody stools. Her history included a large polyp removed from the small intestine as an infant, and her mother suffered from irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. She was initially treated with Lialda without relief. The LRA tests revealed corn, black tea, olive, xanthan gum, orange, ginger, pinene, and food dyes to be reactions. She substituted on counseling for those reactive substances and included supplementation that included a super multivitamin sufficient to keep her urine sunshine yellow, essential fats, bone building nutrients, recycled glutamine, that is glutamine recycled with PAC, pyridoxal alpha ketoglutarate, comprehensive probiotics, blood building complex with ferrous aspartate, hydroxycobalamin, nature's B12, and polyphenolics. 1.5 years later, anemia is gone. CBC has normalized. Hemoglobin is now 12.9. C-reactive protein has come down, but was 1.14 with a goal of less than 0.5. Ferritin, an inducible protein, has reduced now to 14, whereas it had been elevated before. Patient continues on Asacol, although reducing by half what she had been taking. Her weight was back up to 132 pounds, and while she was still amenorrheic, breast tissue was coming back. Acupuncture was recommended once a month in addition to the whole program, and according to the individual, the family was healthier. Her husband had lost weight, the kids were eating healthier too, and they're planning a follow-up repeat LRA tests to reset immune defense and repair tolerance soon. How about fatigue and sleep? Here's a 52-year-old fellow who comes in for chiropractic care because of neck stiffness and pain, intermittent bilateral fingertip paresthesias or dysesthesias, poor sleep, and he's just tender everywhere. On routine labs, high cholesterol and triglycerides, glucose, and a low vitamin D were found. The LRA test and alkalinizing plan included avoiding sugar, removing dairy, eating more frequently. He was guided to graze through the day with whole foods that he could digest, assimilate, and eliminate without burden. Enhance restorative sleep to repair and decrease alcohol intake, while also including some bioavailable supplementation. And the supplements were comprehensive. A super multivitamin, multimineral cofactor to keep the urine sunshine yellow. Vitamin D3, 20 drops a day, 10,000 IU, sufficient to keep that person in the healthy 50 to 80 range. And yes, we do recommend checking on ionized calcium or calcium after 2 weeks, especially in people on diuretics like thiazides. There is a relative contraindication if people are on coagulant inhibitors like warfarin, Coumadin, but as an old coagulationist, we can counsel about that. I was a coagulationist before I became an immunologist. And expected outcomes include better sugar glucose control, decreased musculoskeletal pain because less tissue acidosis, more repairability, and better energy levels. We do recommend magnesium. In this case, it was 310 milligram capsules a day. And that magnesium is better when enhanced with choline citrate to enhance uptake and retention of the magnesium. And comprehensive glucose regulation, including corosolic acid, French lilac, bitter melon known as mara, chromium and vanadium, 2 important minerals in bioavailable forms, 1 or 2 with each meal to reduce excess insulin responses during repair. And yes, chromium deficiency is associated with severe insulin resistance, hyperglycemia, hypertriglyceridemia, and painful neuropathies. And omega-3 supplementation is usual because today we get too much of the omega-6 and too little of the omega-3, and we need both, but we really need to supplement the EPA and DHA to restore omega-3 to omega-6 balance. B6, B12 complex, 3 per day to reduce homocysteine and improve methylation, and nature's form of nutrients in bioavailable ways by choice. In this case, the spouse came and reports that they're both sleeping better, has increased energy, eating more frequently and healthier. And what about rashes and hives. Here's a 58-year-old woman with type 1 reaction, rashes, hives, blisters on the hands, itching, throat closing, and brain fog. The LRA tests and plan were implemented, and she was found to be reactive to cow dairy, potato, sulfite, food colorings, and organophosphate pesticides. After just 2 weeks of substitution, significant reduction in rashes, blisters are gone, significant skin improvements. How about a 50-year-old woman with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Initially treated with Adderall without much benefit. Her symptoms included a lack of restorative sleep, decreased energy, weight gain, and mild alopecia. The program, LRA tests, and plan were put into effect. Gluten, titanium dioxide, sulfite, and salicylates were found to be the reactive substances out of hundreds that were tested for. So substitution was counseled, personal supplements, a super multivitamin to keep the urine sunshine yellow, repair polyphenolics to enhance the ascorbate, bone building nutrients, and adrenal support formula, and an alkalinizing lifestyle. In less than 1 month, better appetite control. 2 months, sleep rhythms returned to normal. 3 months, alopecia, loss of hair is reduced, night tremors gone, symptoms reduced by half. 4 months, energy levels high, sleeping well, focus improved. So healthy immune system is tolerant, has no delayed allergies and no drain on your vitality, no chronic repair deficit inflammation, no self-attacking autoimmunity. So food and chemical sensitivities or delayed allergies overburden the immune system. We don't recommend that. LRA lymphocyte reactions identify all 3 types of delayed reactions concurrently and with less than 3% variance on consecutive blind splits, making it now the gold standard for delayed allergy testing. It's been my privilege to present this information and to synthesize for you what has occupied the better part of the last 3 or 4 decades of my career. May we all be well and happy, and please contact us and let us know how we can support you and your clients so that even in the 21st century, we can use nature, nurture, and wholeness. We can identify the foods that we can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. We can restore neurohormonal balance and competence, and achieve a healthy remission for those who are ill and sustained good health for those in the 21st century who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe. Just some quick housekeeping before we bring Dr. Jaffe on for this live Q&A. If you just now joined us, the way we're going to do this is if you hit the participant button at the bottom of your screen, you should see a white bar to the right of your screen show up. At the very bottom, there's a raise hand function. If you hit that raise hand function, I will call upon you and we'll get Dr. Jaffe to answer any and all questions that you may have. I will call on you by the name that I see on the screen. So if you want to change your name to something else, you can do so now. Or if you're good with me just going ahead and calling you by the name that's on the screen, that's good as well. Let's see. Let's get Dr. Jaffe on here real quick. All right. Dr. Jaffe, are you with us?
I am. Travis, I enjoyed that introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can definitely hear you. I'm gonna.
I'll start. That's a good idea.
All right. We have several questions that people have written in. So if we don't have anybody in the audience right now that needs to or wants to ask a question, I'll go ahead and ask some of these for you. And then
prime the pump, if you would.
I will prime the pump. All right.
Come in.
Excellent. All right. So first question is, if my LRA test shows I am reactive to gluten, does that mean I should avoid gluten for the rest of my life?
Good question, because most glutenologists, gluten experts, those who study celiac and gluten sensitivity, they're not quite the same. Most experts would say once you're sensitive to gluten, You need to avoid gluten in all forms, which means all grains, for life. Now, I am old or young enough to remember when wheat and bread was the staff of life. But that was before genetic manipulation and glyphosate. That was before this, that, and the other thing. And at the moment, my message is very simple, but different. I've often been in the minority at one point in time, and then I ended up in the majority later on, and it's okay, because it's not a vote. It's not about popularity. It's about evidence, facts, and experience. So, if you are gluten sensitive by the LRA test for the next 6 months, I would counsel, advise, guide that you should avoid all grains and have a diet rich in grasses and other foods, a wide variety of foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate based on the testing without immune burden. And then come back and talk to us. Because in addition to being a laboratory, we can guide and counsel based on your personal situation. And yes, it may take more than 6 months, because probably it took more than 6 months to get to have the test done. That is, you're probably more than 6 months old. And your environmental background, maybe even your mom and dad's background, the transgenerational influences, all play a role. So while I personally have followed the LRA by ELISA Act plan and restored my ability to digest, assimilate, and eliminate gluten without burden, but please understand that I eat organic or biodynamic foods. I have a food forest in my front yard. I'll show you that some other time. You could join a CSA. You could have a community garden where you grew some of your own foods. A kitchen garden is a really good thing to promote your health. So bottom line, not necessarily. Now, I know that's an ambiguous response. Some people, the less than 2% who have true celiac syndrome, probably will feel and function better for their whole lifetime if they avoid all gluten, which means all grains. But that means no bread, no rolls, no cakes. If you try to fool Mother Nature, Mother Nature will come back and kind of reprimand you, which is what she's supposed to do. So it's a long answer because it's an important question. It's a complicated issue from my point of view. The answer is not necessarily. When you restore a healthy digestion, a strong, healthy, resilient digestion, now you can take in grains. Until then, avoid them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe. We've got some hands being raised, so I'm going to call on some people one at a time. We're going to go ahead and start with you, Carol. Let me unmute you real quick, and you can ask Dr. Jaffe your question.
Hi, Dr. Jaffe. I'm a lifelong asthmatic with multiple allergies, and I've struggled to find what's the right solution. How do I go about doing the LRA ELISA Act thing, and how do I go about getting a doctor available here?
Aha. Are you in America?
Yes.
Okay, you can call in a toll-free number. Do you have a pencil?
Yep.
1-800.
Yep.
553 5472.
Okay.
And whoever answers that phone will just be waiting for your call to say, what is your zip code? And we'll find you a competent professional. Might be a doctor, might be a health coach. You can do this remotely on your own, but when I look at your face, young lady, and I hear what you said, lifelong, you have had more than a few asthma treatments, inhalers, etc.
Yes.
No. I'm just wanting you to know I understand who you are and what you're saying, because if you were 18 and had never had an inhaler, I might have a different response, but you're not 18 and you have had inhalers, but you're doing the best you can. I can tell that you want to have remission from asthma. You want to be able to breathe. You want to be able to do the things you like to do that at the moment are somewhat limited, because when you start to breathe hard, the little airways collapse because of a lack of repair. A lack of repair. You can quote me on that. The little airways collapse because of a lack of repair, and then you need medication. And I'm saying when you don't need medication, I'm pretty sure you won't use it. And by the way, your stress hormones are a little out of balance, but that's not unusual in asthmatics.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you. And how long does the process take, is my question. I mean, how long does the testing process take?
Yes. So you have 4 days of preparation because you might be on steroids, and we have a steroid bridge. But you need to follow the rules of how to give us a specimen that is active but undamaged. And then we will come back promptly with a counseling and a plan that says, eat this and don't eat that. And by the way, the things we say don't eat, we'll tell you where to avoid them. Because they're often hidden in things you might otherwise like.
Yeah.
No. So thank you. Thank you for asking the question. Thank you for being you. Thank you for wanting to get well. And I would like to hear from you in 6 to 12 months when you tell me you're off all prescription medicines and feeling better.
I love that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Carol. Let's see. We will. Let's go with. All right, Dr. Wiseman. Let me unmute you real quick. Go right ahead.
I turned my video on. Oh, there we go. Hi, Dr. Jaffe.
How are you?
Great, thank you. I had a question for you. So I've had 2 LRAs now, and I've been, let's say, religiously avoiding all the things I should avoid. Let's just say, I know one of the common things is most people lose weight. Haven't really lost weight from it. I still feel like I'm having delayed immune response to things, even though I'm not eating those things. And I'll put in one more thing that I found out about a year and a half ago, is that I'm also dealing with chronic inflammatory response syndrome due to mycotoxin poisoning. So the question is, so what would you say?
Excuse me for jumping in. How long ago was that mycotoxin exposure?
There was a large exposure about a year and a half ago, which is the time that I was tested genetically for that. It just happened at the same time. I'd already did the blood test, and I found out the same week the results of that test, that I had that big exposure. But we've had to do all kinds of remediation from our house but I may still be exposed. I don't know.
Well, no. Thank you very much, because I'd like to start at the last thing you said and back to the first thing you said, if that's okay. So
sure.
With regard to the last thing you said, yes, it's possible that you might continue to be exposed. Therefore, some environmental air testing company should bring in a device and have it breathe the air in your home.
We've done that.
Warm. And what did they find?
The levels have gone significantly down.
No. Reduction in levels is good, but the answer should come back none detected.
Okay, it's not that.
Then you need more remediation. I'm not sure what that means. It might have to do with humidity. It might have to do with looking behind the walls. But
yeah.
In your situation, this is not always the case, but in situations like yours, which are very common, very, very, very common.
I know.
Yes. Remediation is a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
On rare occasion, people have to sell the property and move, but not usually. You can control humidity. You can control your plumbing. You can control where the water is behind the walls, and I don't know whether you do or don't, but many people have air conditioning and heating that comes through that. Yes. If it comes through something called a duct, you have to have that cleaned once or twice. You have to put special filters on, and there are better filters. Is that another country heard from?
No, that's my puppy.
Okay, that was fine.
My attention.
No. No, no, no. Puppies are welcome always. Cats and dogs, creatures are welcome. Okay, so now let's go back to the first thing you said, if I may.
Yeah.
Because I used to weigh 65 pounds more. I've lost the weight. I don't know if you can tell, but I've lost the weight, and I'm not going to find it. Now, it was not easy, and it was not linear. It wasn't a continuous, it was lose 10 pounds, plateau, get to despair, then continue and persevere, then lose 10 pounds, plateau, get to despair, then continue. That's life. Now, what does that mean? It means that in addition to what we found and what you otherwise have found, the environmental issues, and I'm so glad that you pointed that out because it's really common. And many people suffer who don't get the tests, and therefore they don't know that they're really under a burden. Okay, so thank you for doing what you're doing. Follow the program that we have recommended. Have you spoken with Jayashri Mani? This is a health coach that trains health coaches for me.
Yeah, I know Jayashri.
Okay, so please talk to her and say, Jayashri, please schedule a time for Russ and me to talk, not long, I won't burden you, but I'd like to get into more nuances than I think would be appropriate right now about your particular situation and how to give you guidance about what to measure and when, and more importantly, what to do and why. Okay.
Well, I'm just down the road from you, so I will definitely call her. Please or email her. Thank you.
Please. All of the above. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Just for people who are joining us again, if you do have a question for Dr. Jaffe, hit that button there at the bottom where it says participants. And then at the bottom of that white screen, you can hit the raise hand function. And then I will call on you as soon as I see you. Until then, I've got a few more questions from the audience that had actually emailed us. So for that, the next question I have for you, Dr. Jaffe, is if I react to yeast, should I avoid nutritional yeast?
Well, yes, until otherwise distinguished, yeast is yeast. Now, it turns out brewer's yeast is a little bit different from other kinds of yeast that can be used in other fermentation processes, but I don't want to get too far in the weeds. The short answer to that question is yeast is yeast. I don't care if it's Fleischmann's yeast that you use to make bread at home, because we do that, by the way, from time to time. I don't care if it's a yeast starter that has been in your family for generations. And I know some people say that sourdough starters are Saccharomyces and that's not yeast. And that's true. That is absolutely true. The real true sourdough starters are few and far between, and they are non-yeast or a different kind of fermentation organism. I'll bet that was more than you wanted to know. But most of them are contaminated with yeast because, let me check, it's in the air. So if you're doing it at home or they're doing it in a bakery, unless they're doing it under laboratory conditions, there will be yeast. When in doubt, don't. Prudence, whoever Prudence is, and I think Prudence is a female, not a male, but whoever Prudence is, Prudence says, when in doubt, don't. Have grasses, not grains. Avoid yeast if you're sensitive. You'll be better off because you'd be surprised. And talk to us about all the hidden places where you might find yeast. In foods, in processing, in beverages, in this and that. When in doubt, don't, especially in the 21st century. I must tell you, in the 20th and 19th century, I would have had a bit different response, but in the 21st century, the more we can do to protect ourselves, the more we can do to reduce burden on our immune defense and repair, neurohormonal, digestive, detoxification systems, because it's a lot of systems, the better. So if you're sensitive to yeast, until you remove that sensitivity by LRA repeat testing, avoid.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe. Let's see. Our next question is from a patient and a client, and she writes in and says, I reacted to silicates. Do I need to avoid taking supplements and foods that use silicate packets as a desiccant?
Thank you for asking that question. The short answer is the packets that we use that we recommend have a very specific exterior that prevents the silica from getting out, but allows the moisture, which is what the silica absorbs, to get in. So if you're in doubt, don't. But if it's something that we recommend, like our PERT products and similar, trust us that we are very aware of this. And yes, the desiccant packets, the desiccant things that you shouldn't consume but are there to keep it dry, they do have silica in them and silicates. But those don't get out into the product. And when we have silica in our products, which we do from time to time, it's always equisetum. Now, equisetum is probably a plant, a growth that you have seen. It's actually a very ancient plant, and it takes the silica out of the soil, which is very prevalent in soil, and concentrates it. So when you get equisetum and you dry it and properly powder it, you end up with nature's bioavailable, safer form of silica, which is what we recommend. But when in doubt, don't. So if you're not sure of where that silica pack came from, because it could be in a lot of different bottles, don't. I can tell you the ones we use are the more, quote, elegant, expensive. What that means is they have a barrier that prevents the silicates from getting out. So thanks for asking.
Thank you, Dr. Jaffe. So we have a hand raised. Let's see, Diane, I'm going to unmute you and then feel free to ask Dr. J this question. 1 second. There we go. You're on, Diane.
Hey, this is David Calvo. Diane and I are here as usual for your tutorial.
Good.
Are there sensitivities that one never gets over?
No, there are sensitive, you can always restore tolerance and get over the sensitivity. But let me get behind your question. To be really careful about all the hidden sources of all the delayed allergens until you totally restore tolerance is a marathon. It takes time. Yes, I have done it. Yes, others have too. Not easy, possible. It's up to the individual how meticulous they are willing to be for how long a period of time with, shall I say, little or no indiscretions. And more importantly, little or no exposures to those hidden reactors that we can help you identify, but you need to pay attention to.
Well, and behind that question, to use your term, is that there are items on Diane's and my results which we have in our memory not been exposed to, or if so, very minimally been exposed to. And we don't quite understand why we would be sensitive to those.
Okay, so let's get into the particulars because this is a really important question. It's a bit technical, but we're going to get in there right now. Okay, pick an item.
Rutabaga.
Okay. Rutabaga is a vegetable. I'm sure you know that. Rutabaga is an unusual vegetable. You could easily convince me that you have never been exposed to rutabaga, and I can easily convince you that the antigen in the rutabaga, which is a cross-reactivity from that family of foods, is what you're reacting to.
Okay.
Next.
Let me look at my friendly list here. Lipitor. I've never had a statin in my life.
Well, when we say Lipitor, we do mean statins, but when we test statins, what we mean is oxidized fats. And unless you have been measuring your oxidized cholesterol and your oxidized LDL and your magnesium cellular level for a long period of time, given what I know about your history, because we have spoken before, I can tell you that the chance of your cross-reactivity with Lipitor is pretty close to 100%.
Okay. And we'll just go over the issue. But to differentiate chicken from other fowl or bird eggs, I am allegedly moderately sensitive to egg white chicken, but it doesn't say anything about duck. And I know they're in the literature.
No, I want you to be very clear that we are measuring chicken. Whether we're talking about the whole bird, whether we're talking about the protein, whether we're talking about the eggs, we're measuring chicken. If you look at our literature, which I know you have, you will find that we do recommend in alternative to chicken, because a chicken egg today is not a chicken egg from yesterday, but that's a whole technical problem. And we do recommend the eggs that have not been manipulated. This includes quail, duck, and goose. And they are available at community markets. They are available in your region, but you probably might have to actually go and pick them up, which is not a bad thing because, they're cute.
We do that. And I've eliminated chicken eggs pretty much from my and they hide everywhere. But,
other items for us to discuss about how come they came up, because then I'm going to tell you a story.
No, I think everything else is explainable.
Okay, so let me tell you a story. This is a woman who worked for me, and she was my, quote, lab manager, and we tested her because she was healthy, and we like to test healthy people because they don't react to many things. And the only thing she reacted to, out of hundreds and hundreds of items, the only thing she reacted to was wheat, peanut butter, honey, and bananas. And I said, do you eat those? Because we were small at that point. This is many years ago. And she said, no, I don't eat them. I don't like them. But I will tell you that when I was 9, and she was well over 9 of years of age at that point, when I was 9, my mom died, and I went to live with my grandmother. And every day for lunch at school, she made for me a whole wheat peanut butter and banana honey sandwich. And I hated being there, and I don't eat those to this day. And I am telling you that her immune system was never restored to tolerance, and that's usual, not uncommon. Because her immune system was never restored to tolerance, she was still hypersensitive to things that she had not been exposed to for decades. But her immune system remembered, because it's the memory part of us.
And what are the supplements that you
Chestnut was one other that we were in question.
I heard 2 voices, so one at a time, please.
Chestnut is another.
Well, chestnut marron, chestnut, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Chestnuts are actually, if you have anything that is of higher quality in a box, in a can, in a soup, in a this and a that, I will bet you dollars to donuts that chestnuts were used upstream, not disclosed on the label because they don't have to be by legal fandangle, whatever, and very common. I mean, among the most common upstream sensitivities where people say, what is a chestnut? I don't roast them on the open fire. I don't eat them at holiday time. What is a chestnut? I'm telling you, you can find that in many higher quality foods, and by law, you do not have to disclose what is added upstream.
We could not monopolize this, but one more thing is that Diane is tremendously allergic to sunflower oil, sunflower seeds. And as you probably are aware, everything in our world has sunflower in it today.
Not everything, only the processed things that come in cans, packages, and boxes. If you start with whole foods, you can exclude that. That's what I recommend.
That's
You need a makeover in your kitchen. Jayashri and I can help you with that. You need to start from whole foods. You need to make them yourselves. If you are sensitive to something that is everywhere, I can tell you that you need to just start from the beginning with whole foods, nature, nurture, and wholeness. In addition to that, the foods you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. and then stay well hydrated and be nice to each other and get restorative sleep and do a salt and soda bath and relax.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dr. Jaffe, it looks like we have one last question before we wrap this up. And it is, do you recommend the LRA test for young children?
No, thank you for asking that question. I'm not sure what you mean by young child. If the child is still weaning, if the child is still breastfeeding, test mom. Apply the information to the family, mom and the child. And 6 months later, if the child is not dramatically better, I mean, you be the judge, dramatically is a very simple term called better. We'll repeat the test for free on the child. So children below a certain age, generally 1 to 1.5 or 2, children below a certain age are still covered by mom's responsive immunity. Young children, say between the ages of 1.5 and 7, 8, you can test them. It's not a lot of blood, but you have to explain to them that we're going to take something out of you so that we can help you feel and function better. You know, don't do it without explaining to them, because they're smart enough, they're old enough, they're young enough, but old enough, as long as you keep it simple. And then they say, okay, and they put out their arm or whatever it is, because mostly it's the arm. Now, I think that covers children. So if you're really young, still kind of like breastfeeding age, test mom, apply the results to the child and the mother. And then come back in 6 months and give us feedback. Did we do well or not? I can tell you that most of the time, when we do get the feedback, and we get it often, it's very favorable. By applying the information from mom to the child below, say, the ages of 2. If you're over 2, you can test the child. On the other hand, if you could test the whole family, that would be even better, because you will get different results for different individuals. And yes, it might mean making slightly different dinners or lunches for different individuals in the family. But if you start from whole foods, from nature, nurture, and wholeness, if you start from what we recommend, you can do it. And do it without distress, shall I say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe. And if everybody wants to grab a pen and paper real quick, I got some information for you to write down. If you have any questions from anything that you've heard here today, please contact Eliza Act Biotechnologies. The phone number for them is 1-800-553-5472. Or you can contact our client services at clientservices@elizaact.com, as well as going to our website, which is www.elizaact, that's ELISAACT.com. Dr. Jaffe, thank you so much for joining us for this live Q&A. We will have this available for any of you all that would like this video recording. And until then, Dr. Jaffe, if you have any final words, that'd be great.
Well, you know, I'm now young enough and old enough, because I want to be dancing with you at 120, and I want you to be healthy enough to want to dance with me at 120, which is more than 20 minutes from now. But I do want you to know that after a half century in biomedicine, I can tell you the fog is getting clearer. If you eat what you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden, if you stay well hydrated, if you get restorative sleep, if you're nice to yourself and your relationships. It could be with other humans, it could be with plants, it could be with other animals, but relationships, very important, because living in isolation, as many people are right now, is, let me say, a less desirable state than living in communion with life.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaffe. As always, this has been a pleasure. Everybody be well and have a wonderful rest of your day, week, and weekend.